Hi, 8th grade. Today I'm going to be doing a demonstration on how to get started with carving your block print. Each one of you is going to be getting a small little piece of scrap easy cut, and this is going to be your chance to kind of practice using the tools before we move on to using our carving tools on our actual block. So you can see on this side I've blacked it out. I just blacked it out today so that you can see more easily the types of cut marks that I'm making. There are a whole bunch of different types of linoleum cutter tips. I just prefer to use this regular medium size. I personally think this is the best tool and the most versatile. And what I want you to notice is how easy it is to make very light, delicate cuts just by pressing very lightly and only using the very, very point of the piece. When you're practicing, you should try moving your linoleum cutter in different directions. The goal here when you're using your cutter is we're not cutting down. We're doing more of like a shave across the surface. We don't want to gouge down. There's actually oh, this one doesn't have it. Some easy cut will have like an orange core to it. And if you start seeing that orange color show through, you know that you're carving too deep. The cool thing about this particular bit is that you can widen the thickness of your cut just by how you turn it. So if I'm trying to create a thicker cut, I can actually kind of turn my hand a little bit and it will create a wider cut there. So, you know, you might want to take some time to try some straight cuts. You can go back the other way and see how it feels cutting across an existing cut. It'll have a little resistance as you slide across, but this is just your chance to kind of play around and see how it feels. You will generate some of these little scraps. I call them schniblets. For my sanity, if you could sweep these away and throw them into a trash and not on the floor, that would mean the world to me. So you can see here, it's a good idea just to play around. You might want to practice, like if you're creating hair or fur or feathers or scales, you might want to practice some different cuts that will recreate the textures that you're going to be working on in your piece. I really do want you to play around with these, get a good feel for it. Sometimes you can get a good long cut just by moving, and you'll notice I kind of move my hand and I move the block at the same time. You can have a lot of control that way. You'll also see I'm never cutting towards myself. You really have to use a bit of pressure, so pushing away is going to allow you to get the type of cuts that you want. And plus, it's just never safe to cut towards yourself, so we're always going to be cutting away. I'm just doing a little wiggle here, seeing what kind of line it'll create. Yeah, pretty cool. So don't be afraid to play around with different cut types. This is just your chance to practice. When you actually do start carving, I clean my workstation there. When you actually do start carving on your actual design, you want to be really strategic about the kind of cuts that you're using. I like to think about the direction I'll be cutting. Since I'm doing a hamburger, I can probably guess I'll be cutting more left to right when I cut out the bun and the lettuce and the bun down here. So for my background, I kind of want my background cuts to go in a different direction. So what I do before getting any detail work is I always like to come in and cut very, very gently just along my border to create a barrier. And what this is going to do is when I'm cutting away my background, my blade will automatically cut when it meets that little slice, basically. You don't want to be cutting into the white, you don't want to be cutting into the black border. So I'm creating a little barrier here so I know my stopping point when I'm carving. And again, you'll see that I'm not carving deep, I'm just shaving straight across. There's kind of a flat edge on the cutter, and you'll feel it when it hits the glide. So when I'm working on my background, because I know I'm going to cut horizontally across my burger, I'm going to make sure my background gets cut in the opposite direction. Before I do any detail work on the inside, I'm going to do the same thing around the outside of my design. And you'll notice I'm not cutting on the black lines. My blade is running right along the edge of my black outline. Lift it up. And you don't have to make it all in one cut. Anytime I hit like a corner, I kind of pick up my tool. I'm just curving around. I can always come back and thin out these black lines if I decide that they're thicker than I want them to be. Oh, that one's really stuck there. You can see I accidentally cut in a little bit too far, but because I made my outlines really wide, I can kind of correct that. I have a little bit of wiggle room there. I actually want to cut in a little bit more right here as well. Just want to see more definition there. Okay. Now that I've got this kind of barrier, I can start cutting away my background. And depending on what you want your slices to look like, you could do little shortcuts. I'm just going to kind of do long cuts all the way along. And I'm stopping when I hit my little barrier that I carved. I'm not cutting into anything that I want to print black. I like to do the background first because if you make a mistake, it's generally not a huge deal. Plus, we're all learning here. I definitely recommend practicing for longer than what I showed you in the video. And you can see here, I'm just slicing across, I'm not slicing down. And even in these little areas, I want to cut, vertically, because I want to keep this kind of vertical cut pattern going all the way along my piece. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going a little quick. Please do not rush this process. It is, I promise you, so much better to go slowly and create the neatest cuts you can. There's really no benefit to rushing because sometimes when you make a mistake, they're not easy to fix. So it's truly better just to slow down. And remember, we're carving away the negative space. That's going to be the white space in the background. And our positive space is going to be anywhere that prints black. So I'm going to do my little cuts here. I'm not cutting into my black border, but I think you get the idea with the background. You definitely want to come in and do the background first. This should be pretty easy for me. This is a very simple design. I think the hardest part is going to be getting the little wobbly shape of the lettuce. So I kind of cut along my black border there. I'm just going to make a strategic cut for each of these little triangles to create that lettuce texture. And lucky for me, it doesn't have to be perfect because it is food. I am going a little bit quick. Please take your time. So you can see there, I made some cuts to make the lettuce on my burger. You can see the Sharpie is leaving marks on my workstation. For the bun, I'm not going to do seeds. I think this is just a little bit too small, and I really did make the border at the top a little bit thick. So I'm cutting into my black outline on purpose because I accidentally made it too thick, but I evened it out really nicely there. So now, because my background, I had my cut lines go vertically, I'm going to make my burger cuts go horizontally. And my first time through, I don't cut away a ton because I can always do a test print to see how it prints before I decide to come back and carve away more. You can see here. And again, this is a scrap piece. There's some imperfections on this one. I'm just cutting away. And I think I might take a little time to do a test print on the video. It's pretty good. Actually, I am just going to cut horizontally here because I want to be able to show you how it prints. Oops, sorry, I'm going off camera. Again, I'm always cutting away from myself for safety. All right, I'm going to get my ink pad and we'll do a little test run here. Now we're going to be using block printing ink, but for today I'm going to use stamping ink. Let's see how it prints. Give it a good press. Oh, look at that. Very, very cute. Again, this is imperfect. I happen to love these little cut marks. I think my lettuce could probably use a little refining. So I'm going to cut a little bit more. I want a more exaggerated movement to the lettuce. There we go. Let's try it again. So again, you can always come back and add a little bit more, or take away a little bit more rather. I like that a little bit better. A little bit cleaner. Again, it's okay. We're just practicing. It's okay to play around. This doesn't have to be a masterpiece, but I highly encourage you to take time to practice with your tools.